So let's take a closer look at the new Primaris Deathwatch datasheet, which Wargear Choices are looking the most interesting for the Decimus kill team, and how do they stack up against the regular Deathwatch veterans. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Deathwatch, and in this video is taking a look at the new Primaris datasheet for the squad that looks set to be the more standard Deathwatch kill team going forward. The Deathwatch are of course the militant wing of the Ordo Xenos, sort of a special order of Space Marines where the chapters can send off their Marines on rotation here, being supplied with rare technology that's not found many other places in the Imperium, and fighting small kill teams worth of specialists used as a precious weapon of last resort, and deployed against all manner of alien menaces for whom they develop special tactics to break the back of an invasion, often by sabotaging critical infrastructure or the death of a key leader. They had a starring role at the start of Space Marine 2 and look set to feature in the upcoming Astartes 2 animation. The Deathwatch had some older models in Warhammer 40k and had been a niche faction and a small part of the lore, and Games Workshop gave them their own mini range in 7th edition, Kill Team Cassius, and then a bunch of individual kits, both for the veterans, a couple of characters, and their Corvus Blackstar. They do have a solid following, but they are more rarely played than the vast majority of 40k factions out there. One of the single least collected armies in the game, but might be a bit of chicken and the egg between Games Workshop support. Up to this point they hadn't had any Primaris era models released. Then in 10th edition Games Workshop took their codex away for some reason, rolling them into Imperial agents and only bringing them back with a digital index after there was a fair bit of fan demand to do so. I feel like the small digital index they got did a fairly good job of making them work with their limited model range in Warhammer 40k with their mixed Primaris kill teams, and they seem to be doing okay in competitive games right now at least. For their first Primaris era model updates though, Games Workshop decided to replace their standard 7th edition Deathwatch veteran kit, this firstborn one that had a fair amount of flexibility, and the models first came out in Kill Team Tomb World. The Primaris update for these Deathwatch veterans is a bit of an unusual one. There seems to have been a new trend of Kill Team kits where you basically have 5 different models, where each of those models either builds one miniature or a different sculpt of them, which does mean they've managed to hang on to the vast majority of their unique gear. There's things like Xenophase blades, heavy thunder hammers and frag cannons in the unit, though it did seem that as a result the datasheet they got would probably be very complicated indeed, while also being less flexible than the individual one. At time of recording we're waiting for their individual release. It's still maybe not 100% clear whether they'll release them in a squad of 5 or 10, I guess it might well be a squad of 5 though, even if they have had some kill teams like the Striking Scorpions and Scouts, both essentially being 2 5-man box sets bundled into one. I'll cycle through the miniatures and their build options now. You have a Watch Sergeant versus a Xenophase blade guy, a Gravis Marine that can either have the Infernus Heavy Bolter or Frag Cannon, a Gunner style guy with a Bolt Rifle or Plasma Incinerator, a Phobos Operative with Reaver Combat Blades or a Marksman Bolt Carbine, and then a Close Combat Specialist with a Heavy Thunder Hammer or a Power Maul and Shield. I feel like the actual miniature sculpts have been done well enough, and it's quite fun that they have options to customise their appearance with the different head swaps that they have, and quite a lot of chapter specific shoulder pads, though having every guy locked to one of 2 different things just makes the kit feel a little bit less flexible than the others. Even if they do basically have 10 different wargear profiles within the unit, it does feel a bit weird not to have a base loadout for the squad, so you can't just fill them all with bolters or shotguns or something. With the digital rule update for them, I was wondering what might happen to the Deathwatch Veterans datasheet, the firstborn one for the kit that's been retired now. It seemed likely that this would stick around for the Imperial agents given that it's imprint in a codex, that perhaps seems a little bit less guaranteed for the digital Deathwatch index, where if Games Workshop wanted to you could have had the one just directly replace the other. It still seems for now they're keeping it around though, either due to the Agents of the Imperium thing, or maybe treating them in a similar sort of way to the Chaos Demons, where they've got several models that are off sale, but still have current and active 40k rules, things like Epidemius and the Blue Scribes. That means that at the moment in-game they'll be competing pretty squarely with each other. They've got plenty of overlaps with their wargear and are a fairly similar cost. The veterans are certainly a strong unit for Deathwatch currently, so it's these guys that the Decimus team needs to compete against. Let's get on to the rules for the new veterans though, and Games Workshop has come out with 2 datasheets for them, the Decimus kill team in the Deathwatch index in their faction pack now, and the Imperial Agents equivalent in their faction pack. As per the points in the Minotaur and Field manual, it will cost 100 points to field 5 of them or 200 to field 10. So it means that at least initially they're going to be the same price as the 5-man squad of regular Deathwatch veterans, though a bit more expensive than both them and the Fortis kill team if you want to field them as a 10-man squad. For their keywords, they have the similar ones to the Deathwatch veterans. They're battle line, so you can take lots of them if you want to, and have the kill team tag, which means that you can use some very efficient stratagems on them. But as their Primaris, they've gained the Tacticus keyword, which the previous ones didn't have, and at this point that's likely to be a nerf more than a buff, as one of its few effects is to stop you getting into a Rhino, as the Rhino only allows firstborn miniatures to ride in it. It is a bit unfortunate as they had good synergy there. It's a nice transport that can mean that the Deathwatch veterans get into close range, and there's a good ratio between the cheap cost of the transport and the expensive unit it can transport within. For character attachment, they attach as if they could join to a Fortis kill team, so the Watchmaster and Artemis can join, as can most of the on-foot Tacticus armoured Space Marines, maybe the Judas here being another relevant one, allowing them to fight first in close combat. For their stat line, they're the same 2 wound 3+ save Marines and get the OC2 that the Deathwatch veterans do. Not really great defense for the points cost at 20 points per model. The most unusual thing about the datasheet is the effect of the Gravis model. It means that one miniature has 3 wounds rather than 2, which could mean that you could tank a damage 2 attack on that guy and basically waste one enemy attack that might have otherwise slain one Marine directly. To do so though, you would have to take it on one of the models that's most dangerous and valuable in the squad with a frag cannon or some other heavy firepower, so it's still a bit of a trade-off there. Otherwise, the Gravis model gets toughness 6, but that's rarely going to be in effect. If it's a 5-man squad, you'd have to wait until there's just 2 models left, and then the enemy attacks it afresh to be able to get toughness 6 on your unit. Or for a 10-man squad where you get 2 Gravis Marines, that'd have to be 4 or less. Then the Gravis model does mean that the overall kill team might be a touch slower. It moves 5 inches where the other Marines move 6. In the wrong circumstances, this could mean that you have to keep pace with the slowest guy. But I feel like this one might be a bit more of an on-paper drawback. If you start the Gravis guy at the front of the squad, it's going to be at least a few turns before he threatens to drop out of coherency range with the other ones, even if he does gravitate towards the back of the unit. If you do move them around for a few turns in a row, it's still not going to be particularly helpful if he is kind of out of position though. For their special rules, they have Oath of Moment and Mission Tactics. Mission Tactics giving you turns of either sustained or lethal hits, or the ability to flex into them in the Deathwatch detachment, a base Deathwatch thing that you'd expect them to have. And their special rule is the same as the Deathwatch veterans, it's Death to the Alien. Each time you make an attack against an enemy unit, you get to reroll hit rolls of 1. And then if the unit that you're attacking isn't either Imperium or Chaos, he gets to reroll all the hit rolls. It's a handy enough direct damage boost with a bunch of fun profiles, and as with the veterans might mean that the Deathwatch are just a bit more effective if they're fighting against Xenos than elsewhere. Before we move on, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Weyland Yutani terrain. They're one option to get a battlefield worth of Warhammer 40k terrain on the go. They generally cater to tournaments and competitive layouts, including supplying the WTC, one of the biggest and best known tournaments around. Their pieces are aimed to be practical and focusing on gameplay. They're made out of sturdy printed plastic with a bunch of different designs that you can get on them. You can get overgrown ruins or an Arctic laboratory or things, and they can be assembled and disassembled and stored flat, which can be handy for tournament organisers out there. For some examples of their sets, there's this WTC Warmaster pack. This one's got 4 big ruins, 6 smaller ones, and a bunch of crates, and they can come with terrain footprints as well. They also have a Pariah Nexus set, going a bit heavier on the big ruins and the sort of Girder Forest style things, and a few smaller packs with sets of 4 big 3-story ruins. If you do want to check out their stuff, their link's down in the video description below, and if you pick up anything from them, they gave me a code Auspex5 for 5% off, so make use of that if you do pick anything up. In any case, thanks to them for sponsoring this one. Let's get on to the biggest part of the datasheet for the Decimus kill team though, and that's their Wargear Choices. Due to the way that the models are multi-build, literally every guy basically has an either or choice. 4 of them give you direct choices, and then for the sergeant you get one of those automatically with set gear. And then the multi-build of him only gets used if you're fielding a 10-man squad with the Xenophase blades. Going through them bit by bit, they do have some fairly fun and punchy profiles. The Watch Sergeant gets an unusually threatening power weapon, 4 attacks at Strength 5, AP 2 and Damage 2 with Sustained Hits 1, plus also a plasma pistol, though certainly probably think a little bit hard before overcharging it, as if the hazardous goes wrong, then you do risk sniping really quite a valuable model within the squad. It's likely going to be better to overcharge against ideal targets like say standard Space Marines. In any case, he's a pretty solid start and one advantage compared with the Veterans team, getting more hits with sustained hits and also damage too. Then we've got the Gravis armoured guy. He's got a trio of different options. First up, he can take an Astartes grenade launcher paired with a Hellstorm bolt rifle. The grenade launcher would usually want to fire the crack shot with a single shot at Strength 9, AP 2 and Damage D3. And then he gets a boosted Hellstorm bolt rifle profile with 2 shots at Strength 5, AP 2 and Damage 2 with lethal hits. So as a sort of medium strength firepower weapon goes, that's going to be fairly threatening to a bunch of things out there. Then otherwise you've got options for the Infernus Heavy Bolter. That one either fires with a Heavy Flamer profile or a Heavy Bolter profile. Interestingly, compared with the regular Veterans Datasheet, the Bolter profile is massively buffed. It's kind of similar to the Indomitor kill team's one. 3 shots at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 3 with sustained hits, and it hits on a 3+ as well, unlike the Veterans one which hits on a 4. Then finally there's the Mighty Deathwatch Frag Cannon. This one gets D3 shots at strength 7, AP 2 and damage 2 out to 18 inches if you can get up close and personal. It's also rapid fire D3, so around about 4 shots or so on average, plus whatever you get for blast. This one also seems to be buffed versus the regular Veterans version of the Frag Cannon. It hits on a 3+, has extra AP and lethal hits thrown in, and between the 3 profiles they all seem interesting enough in their own right, all with plenty of AP -2 and multi-damage attacks. So it depends on whether or not you want better range with the grenade launcher and the bolt rifle, high damage but no lethal hits and lower strength with the Infernus Heavy Bolter, or the Frag Cannon which is maybe a little underwhelming until it can get within 9-inch range. Depending on the target or the range, different ones of those could be interesting. It does feel like with the sustained hits and the damage 3 though, the Infernus Heavy Bolter does seem a bit standout. I'm not 100% sure whether or not the Infernus Heavy Bolter is going to be keeping that boosted profile. I've heard reports that it's different on the app version of the datasheet, and it's also different to the Imperial Agents one, but on the other hand it is similar to the Indomitor pattern one, so maybe there's a good chance it might stay. Then we've got the Phobos Operative. He's probably the least exciting damage-wise of the lot. I can either choose a Marksman Bolt Carbine for 2 shots at strength 5, AP 1, damage 1, heavy and lethal hits, or swap that out for a single shot at 18 inches with a special issue bolt pistol that gets lethal hits and AP -1, and melee strike with combat knives for 4 attacks at strength 4, AP 1, damage 1 there, and both the special issue bolt pistol and the combat knife get precision, I guess due to being a Reaver. If you're trying to skew to a very slightly more shooty build, then I guess you could go with the bolt rifle. I feel like perhaps the combat blades have the slight edge out of the two though. Either way, this guy feels like he might be the first to be pulled as a casualty, as he just doesn't have quite as much fancy gear as the rest of them. Then we've got a melee veteran. He's got the choice of either a power weapon and a Astartes shield for a 4+ invulnerable save, that power weapon having sustained hits 1 like the Watch Sergeant, or swapping those both out for the much feared Deathwatch Heavy Thunderhammer. They're a lot more threatening than the regular Thunderhammer variant, with strength 10, AP 2, damage 3 and devastating wounds, able to punch pretty hard against sort of medium monsters and vehicles. Judging by the models and previous stat lines, I thought this would be a fairly auto-include for the Heavy Thunderhammer, but the sustained hits and damage 2 of the power weapon means that it's really not that far behind. The power weapon guy is a fair bit better against intercessors or anything lighter. It's kind of similar to Terminator style profiles, the hammer only fractionally ahead there, and the power weapon does have the advantage of getting the invulnerable save as well, which doesn't hurt to have as the squad takes damage. I'd still probably be more tempted by the Thunderhammer to help round the squad out against some tougher targets, but certainly doesn't seem like it's as one-sided as it might have been, and if you have some lethal hits on the go from a character or mission tactics, then the power weapon gains a touch on the Thunderhammer against tougher targets. Then there's the ranged veteran. He gets the choice of either Stalker Bolt Rifle or Plasma Incinerator. The Plasma Incinerator is the Hellblaster pattern one, so 2 shots at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 2, and gets the assault and heavy keywords. Again, the Stalker Bolt Rifle isn't quite as far behind as I might have guessed it to be. 2 shots out to 30 inches at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 2, and it gets lethal hits and precision. The lethal hits do at least a fairly good job of making it not so bad into tough targets, and also having the positive of not trying to kill the Space Marine who holds it every so often. Again, I'd still probably go for the Plasma Incinerator just with the higher strength and bigger hitting AP, but there's really not so much in that one, and the Stalker seems very viable as well. Then finally, if you take a 10-man squad, you get a guy with the Xenophase Blade. He doesn't get any weapon options, and you only get him if you field the 10-strong squad, as he's the alternative build versus the Watch Sergeant. For some reason, Games Workshop didn't include a Xenophase Blade profile on the datasheet itself, though it seems to appear on the app. It looks like it's the same profile as the one on the regular Deathwatch Veterans datasheet. 4 attacks at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 1 with devastating wounds. Not exactly a bad melee weapon, but not as good as the Watch Sergeant without the sustained hits 1 and the damage 2 on the profile. He also gets one of those special issue bolt pistols as well. Then finally, when we're on the datasheet, there's also a variant version of it, the Aquila kill team for the Imperial Agents. For the most part, the datasheet looks very similar, either 100 points for 5 or 200 per 10, and you can fill this in literally every Imperial army, allied in the normal way with the Agents rules. The squad will get quite different supporting rules, I guess usually either being in Imperialis fleet or the Xenos detachment. As you guess, it updates the keywords, it gets Auto Xenos and Retinue for adding into other armies. The Infernus Heavy Bolter doesn't get quite as punchy a profile, there's no AP 2 and damage 3 on this one, though the Frag Cannon still gets the boosted version. And then there's an additional bit of bookkeeping with the kill team rule, having the same thing about the majority toughness coming into effect, so the Gravis model might only boost the toughness for low numbers, but also detailing transports interestingly enough. saying that the Gravis model takes up the space of 2 models in a transport, but doubly underlining that the Gravis model doesn't have the Gravis keyword, which it doesn't in the Deathwatch version of the datasheet either. It does mean that you can have that Gravis model jumping out of a Corvus Blackstar or something. It seems that this unit can also ride in a Rhino, where the Deathwatch version can't as well, given it doesn't have the Tacticus keyword, and Rhinos for the Deathwatch in Agents of the Imperium don't have any restrictions as to transporting Primaris. For the most part, they're going to be the same datasheets, but at -1 though, not being able to use Oath and Moment or Mission Tactics are both quite big deals, and they get far less support in terms of other characters to join the units. Focusing on their use more for Deathwatch though, I was interested to see what sort of damage they might be able to do. And here's just one example squad that you could have for 100 points, a power weapon and plasma pistol on the sergeant, a heavy thunderhammer for the melee guy, a Phobos Reaver with combat blades, a plasma incinerator and an Infernus heavy bolter here, though I could have been tempted by either of the other Gravis variants. With a couple of the models being locked to range and a couple locked to melee, it does mean that you're always going to have a bit more of a mixed role squad, so if possible they're often wanting to be shooting the enemy before following up with a charge. For damage output for that unit, completely non-buffed, and first shooting and charging, they should be able to do at least a fair amount of damage to most targets in the game. They're really quite effective against light infantry and intercessor style targets, between range and melee counting for around about 14 guard equivalents, or around 7 space marine equivalents, so fairly comfortably killing an elite squad of their rivals. They're also not too bad into Terminator equivalents as well, maybe around about 2 or 3 of them killed between range and melee. They fall down a bit more against big tough monsters and vehicles. With average rolling and no further buffs like lethal hits from mission tactics, they only do around about 5 wounds or so to something like a Predator tank, which isn't exactly outstanding. These are the numbers for a regular Veterans unit that you can still field as well. Obviously there's lots of different loadouts that you could go for them here, and you could spec them more for range or melee, and this one goes for a mixed profile of just generic good stuff, a frag cannon, Infernus heavy bolter, 2 heavy thunderhammers and a Xenophase blade, and for the most part the numbers between range and melee combined are at least fairly similar. Weighing up those numbers side by side, it looks like the new Primaris squad, at least with shooting and then fighting, does actually hold its own fairly well. It's got a fair bit more firepower with the plasma incinerator and the Gravis guy. I feel like people might have been underestimating a bit just how much shootier the Gravis guy is with his boosted profiles versus the 4+ ballistic skill frag cannon and Infernus heavy bolters. It does mean at range they outperform against most of the heavier targets. In melee, the Decimus team wins against intercessors or guard equivalents, but only very slightly, but is a bit more significantly behind against the heavier targets, with the firstborn veterans and their heavy thunderhammers doing better at cracking Terminators or toughness 10 vehicles. Between range and melee though, the damage output of both units does seem to be really quite similar indeed, though admittedly pure damage output isn't the entire story. It feels like for the regular Deathwatch veterans they have quite a few other things going in their favour. They can ride in a Rhino in the core Deathwatch army where the other guys can't. If you're fielding them in a big stacked up 10-man squad, then the bigger squad of firstborn veterans is cheaper at 190 points. It's not a huge difference, but for a fairly similar profile, for 10 points cheaper, that is an advantage. The firstborn one's getting more flexibility, with being able to more heavily tailor to range or melee is an advantage, perhaps in particular tailoring for melee. Having 4 heavy thunderhammers and a bunch of power weapons there could get them to sort of critical mass, where a squad with a Judas here might be a really intimidating squad to charge. The Primaris one being locked to a mix of range and melee definitely isn't awful in and of itself, but it is often a bit less desirable if you have the option to min-max either range or melee. For minor disadvantages, there's no chance of plasma overheats as well, and no slow Gravis model moving around the unit, which definitely might not be the end of the world, but occasionally it could be kind of annoying. For side benefits, the Primaris ones don't really have all that much aside from their damage output stats. Perhaps one of the only clear wins that they get is the Gravis additional durability. Getting the extra wound does mean that the squad might be just that bit tankier against damage 2 firepower, and occasionally if the opponent sort of kills them in 2 halves, they might have to contend with toughness 6 on the last couple of models. Overall, between all that, at least on a gameplay effectiveness sort of spectrum, I feel like they maybe are just a little bit behind the Deathwatch veterans for a few reasons. Being able to handle tough stuff in melee is quite a big one, and getting Rhino access and a slightly cheaper matched out squad are quite good advantages as well. I would still say that overall there's nothing actually wrong with the datasheet fundamentally. It can still deal some good damage to heavy stuff, and it's still possible for a bit more of a mixed role squad to be a scary damage threat in Warhammer 40k, though I do feel like probably the points on them just aren't great for competing with the Deathwatch veterans and the other kill teams right now. So maybe understandable, there seems to have been a fair bit of doom and gloom around the rules reveals when they came out. Maybe it's something like 90 to 95 points for the base squad, and maybe 180 or 185 or something on the big one. I feel like you'd be pretty likely to get people playing them. If wanting to make the most use out of them in game at the moment, then maybe delivering them to shooting and charging will be pretty nice with a Watchmaster. Advanced shoot and charge might give you a bit more chance of getting firepower and melee on the go, which they seem to need to. A Judiciary with Thief of Secrets still isn't going to be bad here, though without as many heavy Thunderhammers the squad isn't going to be quite as general purpose and scary to everything that charges it, more threatening to sort of medium infantry. That'd be nice enough with the Deathwatch synergies for mission tactics, teleportation, and special issue ammunition. I feel like maybe some of the stratagems won't be quite so efficient, given the squad's damage is being split between range and melee more though. For example, special issue ammo stratagems feel like they'll go further on Dominator kill teams, where you've got pretty much the entire squad dedicated to range. You could potentially deliver them into battle with an impulsor or repulsor as well, though compared with the Rhino does feel like high investment for the cost of the transport relative to what it can carry. Overall, maybe a few mixed feelings about this one. I think the models do look nice enough, and I quite like the themed shoulder pads. Quite nice to see Deathwatch finally get an update for modern era 40k, though the either or loadouts do have some weird consequences, both for the models and how you can fill them on the tabletop. Until points updates next happen, it feels like they're not going to be top tier for the Deathwatch, though I feel like they're also not as far behind the Firstborn Veterans as the initial internet reaction might have been. The damage output against most things that aren't big monsters and tanks at least seems to be fairly equivalent if you can both shoot and charge with them. Let me know your thoughts though, or any other things that you might have noticed about the datasheet. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas down in the comments below. That's about it for this one though. As mentioned, a big thank you to Weyland Yutani Terrain for sponsoring the video. If you want some tournament style terrain, you can check it out, link down in the video description. Be sure to use that 5% off code if you pick anything up through them. If you'd like to see more like this, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel and help keep the videos coming, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that links in the video description down below. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.